Hello all you lovely people out there, it is Peter, Sam, the Narrow Gauge Engine here, and today is going to be a bit of a weird one as the critic in me and creative in me collide. It is time for not just my, despite the title being called that, but all of our opinions on locomotives. Now, this video will be split up into a few different areas. Firstly, a sort of synopsis on what Locomotives is and some of the backstory relevant to it, as I think some of it is rather interesting. Then we'll have a little gander into the Google Forms quiz I sent out to all of you in January about the audience's opinions and what you all think about the series. Next up, after that, I managed to get some of my VAs to just give a little bit of their opinions on Season 1 and what they've enjoyed about it. Thank you all, by the way. Then finally, it's my turn, and of course, as I've said, it's not been Peter Sam approved if it's not been ranked. So expect a little episode ranking at the end, as well as a little surprise for you all. Alright, here we go, time for the first thing on that list. Locomotives is a realistic, more soap opera style take on the popular children's show Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. It looks at what would happen if these engines were real people with problems and dynamics that real people would share. In a way, it shares similarities to the highly popular fan series The Stories of Sodor by Victor Tanzig. But the more daring and shocking moments have been dialed up a few notches to make the series more interesting. As I previously said, the series does take elements from soap operas, the British ones more specifically, but that's not all. The widely successful crime drama NCIS is also a big inspiration for the series. The music in scenes like this was off the soundtrack from that show. Hell, I even changed the format of the episodes to be more in line with the style of that show, with the title sequence and the flash cut thuds. But let's ignore that and just pretend I came up with all of that on my own and that I'm actually a genius, because I like the praise. Let's delve into the roots of Locomotives and where it all began. To do that, we have to travel all the way back to 2021, which is where it all began. That was my first year on the channel, and I was trying out loads of different ideas. I had the time because of lockdown. Then came my best idea yet, and one I would go back to. What if the worlds of a programme like EastEnders or Coronation Street and a kids show like Thomas and Friends collided? It was an interesting concept and nothing I'd really seen done before, and wanted to give it a shot, so I did. The original Locomotives was made using take-and-play models, and it was really bad. Like, I really did just so awful. So much so, I only did 2 episodes and then just gave up. The passion died as the amount of effort was just too much at the time. Now enters 2022 and the world of Thomas and Friends Roblox. After discovering how easy it was to make videos using that app, I decided one of my previous series needed a chance to be reborn through it. And what better one than Locomotives? It was clearly the best concept, and after tweaking it to make more sense, I was ready to begin filming. After releasing my sneak peek of the pilot, Happy New Year, somehow, and I have no idea how, my good friend Skye-Kenzie, also known as Mystic Dana to most of you, found the video and then just like that, boom, became good pals, and she agreed to my offer of helping out with the series. I had never had someone but me working on a project before, and it was exciting. The buzz I got from that is such a unique feeling, and I don't know if I'll ever feel it again. But it sparked me to ask other creators to help voice work wise, namely the Adonis Rob the Green Engine, a creator who I will never stop appreciating ever, and the ever wonderful and extremely talented Bluey 2. Then after episode 1's release, it was decided that my voices for Toby and Percy sucked by literally everyone, including myself. So Throarez the Ivor Engine, a superb creator here on the platform, replaced me for episode 2 for those voices until the end and did amazingly. As much as the gravelly ass, almost cockney Toby will always have a place in my heart. Season 1 of Locomotives did well. We all helped to make some absolutely amazing episodes and even bagged a reaction of the first 3 episodes from Little Owl, who offered his help by also voicing some characters in the series, and he also sang some sweet tunes for us. I'm leaving all of their links in the description so you can check them out, but yeah, that's about it it for the backstory and the overall synopsis of this video. Now let's move on to the next section, your opinions, you the fans. We're going to move on to your opinions, the fans. Way back in January, I sent out a questionnaire to you guys via the community tab and later made a little video about it for those who can't see the community tab from their devices. Most of the questionnaire was to do with locomotives, but I also added some questions to do with the channel in general because I thought it would be wise to get some general feedback. I'm just going to be focusing on the locomotives related questions though, those other ones are for my eyes only. Side note, some bits of this will be with my mic and some won't, because recording all of this took a long time, and during that time I bought the mic, so the ranking stuff at the end will be without the mic. This stuff in between will be. The backstory obviously wasn't, as you already heard. So yeah, just clarifying, if the audio quality fluctuates and does different shit, it's because of that. Anyway, let's begin with the first question. Which episode from season 1 has been your favourite? And there's a tie. 27% of voters chose Guilt, as you might expect, but then another 27 chose Aftermath. A rather interesting choice in my eyes. The only reason I could think of as to why Aftermath is favoured among you lot is down to the comedy, which is fair enough, I guess. It was written to be comedic, so I'm glad it worked. Other choices for voters were Demons, Drought, Newcomer, Kindness, and Bittersweet. More interesting picks there. The second question is, which episode was the least favourite? There's not a tie this time, it's an overwhelming majority and they voted for Happy New Year, which is definitely something I can agree with. The runner-up though was Drought. That's so odd to me. Some chose it to be your favourite, and some think it's the worst. I mean, it was the outlier of the season for sure, but I guess depending on whether that's a positive or negative thing is more of a person-by-person thing. Other choices for voters included Demons, Acceptance, Colour of Money, and Autumn Blues. Now on to the characters. Which characters were people's favourites for this season? Another overwhelming majority, and they voted for James on this one. 40%. In fact, wish you would have mentioned that before I killed him. Second place goes to Thomas, and other voters chose Duck, Gordon, Edward, and Percy. No love for my boy Alfred. Devastated. You know what's next. Least favourite characters. Everyone really voted for the same 4 characters, 3 of which tied in second. The one that got in first is Sir Topham Hatt, which is quite fascinating to me, to be honest. There's a few reasons I could think up as to why this is so. Firstly, because he's not really had much of anything in the series, something which will change for season 2. Also because he is rather one note as a character himself. It's an interesting choice regardless. Anyway, the other 3 characters that tied in second were Terence, Neil, and Lady. Again, rather interesting stuff to think about. Some said in the responses that they're underdeveloped characters, which is fair enough and something I can agree with. Not everyone had their time to shine in season 1, and it's something I'm hoping to build on with the next season. Now for the final question, the question that I'm going to spend more time on as it's in regards to season 2 and the new stuff that you guys want to see. What are you looking forward to in regards to a season 2? I'm going to go through each answer, maybe give a little bit of info and just generally discuss it. The first one we have here is new characters. Yes, there are absolutely going to be new characters brought into season 2, and there will be some focus on all of them. By my count, there's 5 new arrivals that become permanent fixtures to the railway, and a few others that are sort of sprinkled in as minor characters. The next response is to do with new sets, and yeah, I think there'll be 1 or 2. Most of the sets seen in season 1 will be used in season 2, although I can think of 1 or 2 that haven't been used yet that will be used in the upcoming episodes, so be on the lookout for those. Next response is actually something more than one person put, but the narrow gauge engines, their arrival into the series, and I can confirm that the Skye-Lowy Railway will not be appearing in season 2. Now that does not mean you won't be seeing them at all. I have my own plan for them regarding the show, and when I'm ready to announce it, I will. But as far as season 2 goes, you won't be seeing them. We have another response here, which talks about learning more about Alfred, and yes, that is something you can expect for season 2. Alfred's whole thing, the reason the other engines didn't like him at first, will be revealed in this season. It's focused upon for a few episodes, and will show Alfred in a light that you may not have seen him in before. The last response we have here talks about more runaways, crashes, deaths, as well as seeing how the engines cope with James's unfortunate demise. Of course, what would any Thomas and Friends centered series be without its runaways and crashes? Season 2 really does have a lot of them, so I hope you're looking forward to those. And deaths, well, I'll have to keep some things a secret. Come on, what'd you take me for? So that was your opinions. Now let's shift over to the experiences the crew had with this series and see what they think about the show in general. Now I'm going to pass the torch to my wonderful crew who helped with the voice work on the series. Also, sorry if I sound like a train wreck, pun intended. I got sick, and whilst I would wait a little longer to make this section of the video, it'd probably mean falling behind on other videos in the lineup. You're not going to have to hear sick old me ramble on for this part though, so that's something at least. The first VA I have on the list here is Skye-Kenzie. As the first VA that agreed to do this, I felt it was only fair that she gets first dibs on her experience with locomotives. Take it away, Dana.
Okay, this is gonna be my experience on working with locomotives. Working on locomotives has actually been a very positive experience with voice acting in the fandom. I get to be a part of this series, which I stumbled upon someday. I think I stumbled upon Peter Sam's channel late last year or whenever. And it looked really interesting, and I saw the preview to Locomotives and like, oh, it's nitty gritty, kind of that dark, dingy series vibe, which I'm all for. I feel like just working with Peter Sam in general has been quite professional. I've really enjoyed working with him, and I've either established or made connections or like evolved some of the relationships that I've had with other people in the fandom as well. And I feel like also this series has just expanded my voice and creativity as a content creator and also as a voiceover artist. I played Emily, Rosie, and Lady. Emily is definitely by far my favourite character to voice. She kind of has that high-pitched bitchiness to her. Rosie was also a really good character to voice as well. When I was asked to voice Lady, this hadn't occurred to me, but I'd never voiced Lady before. So it was very interesting to voice an engine like Lady, since she's depicted as like mystical, magical. Doing a lady voice felt quite out of my realm as a voiceover artist, but I feel like voicing Lady has expanded that, and ever since Locomotives I've been asked to voice Lady numerous times, which is quite interesting because prior to voicing in Locomotives I thought, oh, I'm never gonna voice Lady, I don't have that soft voice for that, but apparently people really like my Lady voice. I really enjoyed working on Locomotives, like a lot. It's probably actually one of my favorite types of videos to work on as well. And I feel like just the cast and the crew, they're just so, I don't know how to describe it, they're just so happy and just really a good crew, a good lot to be around. The writing of the episodes, they're definitely, I can definitely feel very Emmerdale vibes from them. I haven't watched Emmerdale, but I think that's what it inspired from. Don't quote me. I can see the kind of sitcom-y, soapy opera vibe to it, which I don't mind because it kind of reminds me of Stories of Sodor a little bit. I mean, Peter Sam was inspired by Stories of Sodor also to make Locomotives, but I can definitely see some similarities between that and Locomotives. That there's just there are some episodes that were just really sloppy. I feel like that comes with any series that's just starting. I feel like it's really, the episodes are actually really good. Some of them can be lacking sometimes, but they are actually really good, fun episodes to just participate in. And also I was the thumbnail maker as well, which that also adds a level of professionalism to my journey in Locomotives, which that was just even fun making the thumbnails. Really enjoy doing that. Overall, I have really enjoyed playing all of those roles in Locomotives and just designing the thumbnails and seeing how much the series has evolved throughout time. There was a lot of, I guess, lore and stuff like that. I will also digress to the Roblox side of it. Yes, it is done in a game made by a gnome, made by an idiot, an asshole. But I feel like that is like a small part of it. Like, it's probably only used just to make it a little bit more clearer, like the game, to make it a little bit more realistic. There are not a lot of Roblox games with realism attached to it, so I guess speed skips maps will have to do for now until someone makes a realistic map, I guess. That's why I don't use Roblox much. But yeah, the Roblox aspect, yeah, there's not much that can be done with that. So in total, I just want to say I have really enjoyed working on Locomotives, and also I am very looking forward to doing a season 2 with Peter Sam and the Locomotives voice actors again.
Now, next up we have the wonderful Juarez, the Ivor Engine, who joined the cast in episode 2, playing Toby and Percy and later Donald. Let's see his thoughts now.
String cheese. Hi everyone, I'm Forrest the Ivor Engine, and I voice Percy, Toby, and Donald in Locomotives. I'll be honest, when I first joined Locomotives, I thought this was just going to be like maybe 2 or 3 episodes before Peter just thought to quit the project. Look who turned out wrong! But this turned out to be one of the best projects that I've ever been a part of, aside from all of my projects. Favorite episode, I'd have to say, would be episode 7, being Guilt, I'm pretty sure. Because that one, with the tone that Peter Sam was going with it just hit all of the marks that it needed to. Especially with my performance as Percy in that episode, I think was my personal best. Some may argue episode 20 being one of my better scenes as well, but for me, episode 7 was where I shined as Percy. What I also consider to be sort of my peak to my emotional side of Percy. So yeah, this show's been amazing. Lee's favorite episode, I've already talked to him about this, and I'm pretty sure to whoever's seen it, I think also agrees with me on this. Lee's favorite episode is episode 18, Autumn Blues. Just because the plot's all over the place, as all of the subplots are just pretty much take over the main plot of that episode, and it just feels wrong. As well as the final scene, it was the wrong song. In fact, I personally don't think there even should have been music for that scene. Well, if there were, maybe it could have been like some soft, mellow music. But anyway, because like with Percy in episode 7, I gave my all into that rage that Donald had, but when I watched it, it got overshadowed by the music, and it was just internally wrong. Enough of that. In terms of the characters, I definitely have to say that Douglas was my personal favorite, although it was a close second to Thomas and Gordon, but Douglas is my personal favorite. Pretty much he's the only one to stay mostly true to his original arc in the book, although his ending, I will admit, is changed, which I actually kind of like. You need to at least have a character, doesn't have to be a main character, just a character that's still relatively connected to the books, to the original source even, which just makes the character that much more different from everyone else, if you can understand what I mean by that. This fan series has a lot of potential, and I, for one, can't wait to see where Peter Sam will take it with season 2. Out of everything, I think the one thing that he'd need to change would be pretty much just to extend the runtime of the episodes, because while 12 to 15 minutes is good, it's not getting enough content into those episodes. A set of characters I would like to see if possible are the Skarloey Railway characters. Yeah, I honestly hope to voice Skarloey in that. And if he does, I have a feeling I know who our good old buddy is going to be voicing. That's pretty much all I've got to say before I start having these 2 glasses of gin right next to me. So yeah, I am Thoros the Ivertension. Thank you for watching.
And finally, we have the main man himself, Rob the Green Engine, the man that needs no introduction. Let's have a look at his opinions now.
Hello viewers, Rob the Green Engine here, and I had the absolute pleasure of voicing Henry, Duck and Douglas in Series 1 of Locomotives, as well as a few unnamed extras, like the drivers and firemen, but no one really cares for them. But those 3 characters, absolute joy to voice. What can I say about the series as a whole? Well, it exceeded my expectations, that is for sure. Firstly, how I got the role. Peter Sam asked me at a very good time, at a time when I was thinking of going back into doing voice work. It had been a little while, I was on a bit of a hiatus. Peter Sam, who'd commented on a lot of my videos, I think I was at a point with my videos where I needed the praise. I won't do it for the praise, but it was needed to motivate me to do more. And such a not be polite guy, as you all know, you're watching his video, you're subscribed to his channel, you watch this series, of course you know exactly how nice a guy Peter Sam is. And so he picked a good time to ask. I was keen to do it. Douglas, I think overall voicing him was probably the hardest one out of the 3 regulars. My Scottish was a bit rusty, so didn't really mind. Bit of spoilers, but Douglas does leave at the end of Series 1, and I'm too disappointed that I don't get to voice him for Series 2, whenever that is. Henry, my absolute favourite. I've been inspired by Keith Wiggins' voice for him. I've got very used to it. It's an easy voice to do. It's what I enjoy doing. And then there's Duck, who was actually my favourite out of the 3 characters I've voiced. Because, well, for those who do not know, I am from Bristol. I live in Bristol, which is pretty much at the heart of Western England, and so for all intents and purposes, I am Great Western myself. And in order to do Duck's voice, I just do the voice that I hear around me every single day, West Country accent. Easy to do, so easy because I'm surrounded by it, so I thoroughly enjoy doing Duck for my heritage, really. What do I think of the 3 characters, the portrayal of those 3 characters? Well, Douglas, maybe could have gone a bit further, could have had a bit more development. He was more or less the other twin. Compared to Donald, who did so much more. Had his thing with Lady, which was good to see. I was on board with that, but Douglas in the end, didn't have too much purpose there, so it made sense for him to leave. Henry, I think I don't know what it is, but maybe a little bit more thick in this version of the show, which I don't really mind. I can deliver that kind of performance if that's what Peter Sam is looking for, and I don't mind that slightly different angle. But the heart of Henry is still very present in the show, which is absolutely a necessity for Henry in any fan series. So I'm glad he's still got that. And Duck, he's a rogue, he's a lovable rogue. He bends the rules. He's loyal as well, so loyal in this show, and I absolutely love it. And I look forward to voicing Henry, Duck, as well as at least one other character, but I shan't reveal yet because I'll leave that to Peter Sam to reveal who else I'm voicing when we get to Series 2. But that's what my thoughts on all the characters I voiced. What about the show itself? For context, I am a soap opera fan, I am a drama fan, thrillers, particularly nitty-gritty dramas, but with well-rounded characters. I want to watch a drama and care about all the characters that are going through these hugely dramatic and thrilling scenes, and Locomotives has that in bits, absolutely. Of course, there's a drama. The heart of the show is the heart of the original show. Tolls of Res is so present in this show, and the dramatic stuff is only half the story with this. As dramatic as the show gets in places, the characters are still feel very much like the originals. They've been developed slightly. I mean, Tollis is a lot wiser. Firstly, Gordon's more caring. Various differences are made, but for the purposes, but without complete alteration of the characters we know and love. And as for the dramatic stuff, the stuff that has drawn most people in, has certainly kept me hooked when watching it, as well as being in it. Why I've tuned into every single episode. I was raised. The very first episodes I watched were really dramatic Series 5 ones, so naturally I had that slight interest in making a series really dramatic. But obviously, as if you watched me for a while, I do not. A lot of projects I planned have not gone fully off the ground. But so watching Locomotives, I think, this is very close to what I wanted to make out of my series. So it's really nice to see that someone else has had roughly the same idea and has done a good job at it. And I'm glad to be a real part of it. Favorite episodes? I mean, there are some good ones. Ones where it's natural. You like the ones where your characters are the most prominent ones. So the Duck ones, the Henry ones. Maybe episode 10, Thunderstorm. I go my favourite episode for that one. Favourite moments? These big moments. Obviously Neil's death in the first episode. That was the moment. That was the moment. Probably the moments of the show where like, we're it's going to be that kind of it's going to be that kind of series. Nobody's safe in this show. Dramatic moments can happen to anyone. Then there's the awful death of Rosie in episode 6, I want to say, which goes on for several episodes. It's Thomas coming to terms with it all the tributes. I mean, that feels genuine. I love how that was handled. And then in the very last one, I hope you've watched all the episodes so far, because you wouldn't be if you were watching this review video where all us voice actors are discussing the show. But James's death in the last episode, I didn't know that was going to be the case until we saw the post-credits sequence at the end of episode 20, and so yeah, that was a real shock. We'll see how that's handled in series 2. Some real shocking moments in there. Disaster. Everyone has major moments. Everyone feels like they're partially developed by the end of the first series. There's some that we'll hopefully see more of in series 2. Lady maybe a bit more. Fergus and Terrence come back with Lisa Howell's voice. I love that the show also. It started off as a very small cast, because there's five of us voice actors altogether, I want to say, plus 6 if you include Little Owl, who was more of a guest voice actor for like a few episodes. Yeah, I'm glad it's starting off small, and I'm sure it will grow series by series, because Peter Sam has already said new characters and new voices are potentially coming. Having the NCIS theme as the theme tune for this show, that is brilliant. I've recently got back into that because of this. Recently watching a bit more of the NCIS, and I love that. The fact I see my name while hearing that theme tune, that's really cool. Locomotives, I am very much hooked. I won't lie to you, my interest in fan series has dropped quite a bit as of late. My interest in voice acting for said fan series has dropped too. But this has really drawn me back. It's been a while now since I've done regular voice acting work. But I'm glad there's a great place to return. I intend to stay for however long this series, however long Peter Sam wants to make this series, however much he has planned, unless he decides to kill all my characters off and then not have me back. Who knows? But Locomotives Series 1, great starting point. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to Series 2, the continuation, voicing Henry, Duck, and some more characters. I look forward to all of that. So thank you, Peter Sam. You've done a good job, and I'm glad you picked me to be involved in this amazing project, which is, like I say, I at one point wish I could do, and I look about that and think it's like my ideas passed on to someone else's brain. You know, I'm glad I could see something with a similar idea to what I wanted to do. And so, good job here, Sam. Thank you for having me on this video. And this will probably if I've taken the longest out of everyone to review, I apologise, but good job, mates. Thanks for having me, and look forward to Series 2.
Big thanks to you three for your submissions and contribution to this video. Now we've reached the last bit of the video, the bit that I know all of you wanted to see, and so I put it last because I am truly evil. My opinions. Wow, that sounds big-headed. It's not what I meant.
Now it's time for my thoughts on the series, probably the bit that some of you have been looking forward to, considering rankings are what my channel is notorious for at this point. So what do I think about season 1? Well, as I've said before, I really enjoyed it all. I enjoyed filming when the app didn't crash or when the map decided not to break just as I'd set up a scene. The editing was great too, seeing the episode come together was always a delight. And of course, listening to the VA work for the episode in question was always fun. Speaking of the VAs, I shall be doing a little award for each episode I talk about, the Best VA Award for that episode. It'll be given to the VA that I believe stood out from the others and did the best in my opinion. Every VA gets at least one, so if you are a VA watching this video and you're thinking you won't get one, you will, because you're all deserving of it. Take a shot for how many times I said VA just then. Anyway, let's get started with the worst episode in my opinion, and you can probably guess which one it is. Number 20, Happy New Year. In a way, having this episode be the worst one of the season is a blessing and a curse. It's great because it means it never gets as bad as this again, but a curse because it's like 10 minutes long and makes it difficult to get into the series. However, I'm not going to sit here and say that the pilot is void of anything good, because it isn't. The humour here is pretty good if I do say so myself, and I think there's enjoyment to be had in that Toby segment where he puffs around Sodor. That's pretty much it with the good stuff. Now on to the bad stuff. This episode is so unfocused and so messy, and that was because I leaned way too much into the soap opera style, even adding that thing in the middle. You know? That thing. I didn't yet have my own developed style, and that is seen through the editing, writing, and how I filmed the fucking thing. There are so many odd and ugly shots throughout this one that you wouldn't find in one further down the line. Like, what are these angles? Anyway, that's why I gave this episode a 3 out of 10, because there are a few things that make it not bad, but it is mostly pretty weak. Oh yeah, and before I forget, the VA award for this episode goes to Rob the Green Engine. Rob, I don't know if you want to take that as a compliment or a slap to the face, but either way, you were great this episode, so yeah, you're welcome. I think. Moving on. Number 19, Autumn Blues. This one stung a bit, being one of the more recent ones. It's clear to anyone that takes the time to watch this one that it's not exactly awful, just strange. For some reason, I put the Douglas storyline in the back seat and decided to give James a plot where he pulls the express for the 3rd time this season. Not joking. At least in Happy New Year, it's more forgivable as it's the pilot, and in Drought it helps move the Toby plot forward, but here it just serves to humiliate him a bit. The other plot here is Alfred working in the quarry. All this did was set up why Alfred was in the quarry in the finale when his trucks ran away. And that was it. Oh, and let's talk about the final scene. I decided to take a gamble and put some fucking corker of a song in the background, only to realise upon a rewatch, and after my good friend Thrares pointed it out, it just shifts the entire tone of the episode and makes watching it super jarring. Of all the things I could have done, another Terrence story, expand the Douglas exit storyline, do something, just anything with Emily or Henry, I choose another boring James plot and a plot that sets up that character's death later on. Oh, by the way, if you haven't watched the series yet, then expect spoilers. I thought that'd be obvious, but just be warned. I can say though, despite its flaws, the camera work, the editing and the writing I have no problem with, despite the stories themselves being bad, so that's good at least. Now for the VA award this episode, and it goes to me. And yes, before you ask, I can do that. I still count, screw you. I think the way I articulate with James and Gordon is great, and who else would want to sit there proud and say they got a VA award for Autumn fucking Blues of all episodes? Oh, fun fact, it wasn't until after uploading the episode that I realised that the episode was called that because it was released in autumn and it makes me sad when I watch it. So there's that. Now on to number 18. Number 18, Aftermath. Despite it being called that, this isn't really an aftermath of anything. There's like 2 lines of dialogue shoved in there about Edward and that's it really. Besides that, this episode is such a mixed bag and it makes it so odd. The editing in some areas is really good, but then it's just really bad in others. Also, I should note that this is the first episode to use the new style that you're more accustomed to now with the new intro and the flash cut thuds. But yeah, anyway, the sound is a bit odd throughout this episode, the background noise is sometimes way too loud, and the scene transitions aren't the best. Once again though, it's not without its positives. There's a great dynamic between Alfred and Henry here, and the James story is good too, although that unfocused style has sort of slipped through the cracks again. We're not going to talk about that Hag of Brendan Docks thing, A, because I can never remember it exists until I think about this episode for a while, which nobody should be puzzling themselves through, and 2, because it's bad and poorly developed. Is it obvious I just shoved it into the episode the day before because I went through the script and realised it was way too short? Because that is what happened. Oh shit, I'm supposed to be talking about the positives. That final scene is the best part of the episode. It's so short, so simple, and yet is very effective with what it's trying to do. Here, I'll let you watch it. Chalk! The best VA award for this episode goes to good old Juarez because his work as Donald here is some of his best. All in all, Aftermath is weird and is probably the last one of the series I'd call truly bad. Now on to those mediocre ones that you probably forget about. Number 17, Newcomer. The early episodes obviously are going to naturally have more problems than the ones later down the line, simply due to experience. Newcomer is no exception. However, I think what makes this episode the first one we can call not terrible is the memorability of the stories here. Doc arriving, Thomas and the big engines arguing, Edward's sadness over Neil. It's all pretty good stuff. However, what lets this episode down is its editing, as Newcomer is pretty weak in that department because I hadn't got much experience there yet. Speaking of newcomers, Juarez the Ivor Engine, a great friend of mine, made his debut in this episode, and boy oh boy did he kill it. He's such an improvement over me and nails the characters he does perfectly. In fact, he can have the VA award for this one because of that. Such a refreshing voice for the series. Narratively speaking and writing wise, I think this episode holds its own fairly well too, especially in that big argument scene. It felt empowering and just great overall. In the end, it's that writing that stops me from calling Newcomer not terrible, as well as the ending. It's subtle but somber, and I love how that little bit can tell an audience so much about what Edward's going through. An okay-ish one to be sure. Number 16, Solutions. Solutions is an odd one for me. It feels a bit jumbled up in terms of storylines, and that can make watching the episode a little bit messy, but everything that is present throughout the episode is quite enjoyable. That's my confusion with it, although I guess that's what makes it special. It's not like it doesn't do anything for any of the characters either. It's the female engines here that actually get the most development, and I find that pretty cool. Emily shows herself to not be shoved aside by anyone, not even Sir Topham Hatt. Meanwhile, we get more of Rosie's relationship with Thomas and how much she cares for him as well as how much he cares for her. There's some nice scenes in there with them, despite the kinda cringe flirting. Makes me wince every time I see that scene. Anyway, the best VA award for this one appropriately goes to Dana for her great work as both Rosie and Emily. Other than that, I haven't got much to say. Solutions is just one of those ones that exists and I'm fine with. There's no real strong opinions from me, although that Percy scene does make me smile every time. I'll play it for you now, mainly because I just want to watch it again.
On the mines! I've always wanted to visit here. Oh, it is a lot smaller than I thought it'd be. Oh well, never mind. Time to do some work!
Oi, watch out, you little green goblin.
Hey, I'm not a goblin! That would be how this day starts.
Number 15, Changes. Changes is perfectly fine in my opinion, a perfectly inoffensive episode. Whilst the narratives, besides Edward's return, aren't the best, the way it's written, edited, filmed and voiced isn't atrocious at all. Like, the narratives themselves aren't impactful and are just little ones to enjoy, but they are enjoyable I think. Doc and the whole special attraction thing, the beginning hints of Alfred's past, Donald and Lady finally getting together, and Percy and Terence being simps towards one another, as Little Al so delicately put it. With this one, I haven't really got much to say in all honesty. It's just a nice episode with some nice plots and nice characters. I guess that is the word to describe it overall. Nice. So I'll move on. Oh yeah, and the VA award goes to Rob the Green Engine because I really liked him as Douglas in this episode. Number 14, Kindness. When Little Al did his reaction video of the first 3 episodes back in April or May time, he said that Kindness was the best of the 3 episodes. At the time I didn't agree, as I had a much more enjoyable time with Newcomer and thought it turned out better, but looking back on it now, I have to disagree with my previous self and say that Kindness is the best of the first 3 episodes. There was great improvement on the writing and it was more focused towards 1 or 2 plots instead of a multitude of them all over the place. The VAs also saw improvement here as well as the editing. Everything that makes up this one is an improvement upon what came before, and it was a good omen of things to come. Also, fun fact, this episode marked the first appearances of Annie and Clarabelle, or it's at least the first time in which they have speaking roles. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give the VA award this time to the Blue E2 for his great performances as Edward and Clarabelle respectively, especially Clarabelle. I love what that man does with Clarabelle. Although really, all of the VAs this episode were fantastic. It was pretty hard to choose. Kindness is a nice episode. It's sweet, it's funny, and you can have a nice time with it, which is why it got as high as it did on the list. However, the other episodes are just better in general, so that's why it's been placed at number 14. Number 13, Colour of Money. If it wasn't for the flashback with Toby's backstory, this episode would have been way lower down most likely. Apart from the start of Douglas's exit storyline, there wasn't really anything else besides the Toby thing of much substance. Looking back on the episode, it was quite eye-opening for a few reasons. I think the Thomas being sad thing is quite old at this point, man really needs to find something else to cry over. Also, the context of the first scene isn't really explained all that well. It's supposed to be that some controllers of neighbouring railways are coming to visit Sir Topham because he's in a financial crisis, and they want to see if they can help. And then one of them offers Douglas the position of express engine on their railway, and the rest is history. But apart from that, the rest of this one is solid. The VA award this time round goes to Juarez once again because of the way he does sad scenes. They are truly beautiful and he is phenomenal at it, as well as the narration. It's as if he has a whole series where he does audiobooks on the railway series, which you should totally check out by the way. I have not been bribed at all. But yeah, Colour of Money is another perfectly decent one and has a few pivotal moments in there that keep it holding strong. Number 12, Bad Karma. This episode marks the start of a few things. Firstly, it's the first time I ever filmed a crash and it was great fun. That scene will always stick out in my mind because of that and is probably the highlight of the episode for me. Episode 2 was the first time I ever did something technical with Percy derailing, but I wouldn't call it a proper crash by any means. Bad Karma also marks the debut of my personal favourite character of the series, Alfred. He's well voiced in my opinion, and as the only character that hasn't appeared in official Thomas media really, it allowed me to shape his character into one that's more sympathetic and complex, as opposed to a one-note villain. It's helped by the fact that so far I haven't exactly revealed what Alfred did, so for all the audience know, he could have just been a bit mean and was shunned for it. He could be no worse than James, a character that many of you love in this series, and yet you treat the pair completely differently, judging from some of the stuff I've seen commented on when you all talk about the series. Anyway, I'll stop gushing and start talking about the episode at hand. Bad Karma, aside from the crash and the introduction of Alfred, is an okay episode. The writing's good, and the way the characters interact with one another here is fun to watch, helped by the VAs. But the narrative's a bit all over the place, and the editing work isn't exactly stellar. It needs improving upon for sure, and feels rushed in places, but I still like it. I have very fond memories making this one, probably for the reasons above, and seeing it come together was an absolute joy for me, especially because it was clear that I had improved since last time, and so did the VAs. But I think the VA that was the best in my opinion this episode was Dana, because Rosie in this one is great and I love the scenes with her in. If you're looking for an early episode that you'll have a good time with, I think Bad Karma is one you very well may enjoy. Number 11, Mainspring. I think that Mainspring is a decent episode that is quite a bit bleak towards the end, but I like that contrast in tone. It's not like Autumn Blues where it's so jarring that you might as well call it a glass container you can fill with jam. It goes from a very normal, realistic tone to this darker tone within the last minute or so, and I think that the music, or lack thereof for the credits, really helps bring that out. Fun fact, the credit sequence here is actually based off this scene from the soap opera Coronation Street.
I don't understand.
I think the two main things I can critique here is the narrative side of things and the editing side. Let's start with the editing first. Some sounds don't feel loud enough in this one and that really hinders it. The volume and scale of some sounds when compared to others just doesn't work and it made watching it a little annoying. Then there's the narrative side. There's this random scene of Edward and Toby just shoved in there for little to no reason and I have no idea why it's done. Sometimes I'd add scenes in to make sure that VAs had enough to do in an episode, so maybe it was for that reason, but I don't know to be honest. To be fair though, even though that scene was in there, this episode still comes out as the shortest episode of the lot, just barely surpassing 8 minutes, so maybe it was to do with that. Then there's Lady's introduction. She just appears and I don't like that. It's not really explained where she comes from either, and it makes that a bit jarring as I said earlier. Although I guess that lack of explanation coincides with her magical character. I definitely think I improved voice acting wise for this one. It's not as massive as the improvement between this episode and Guilt, but it is still quite noticeable. And as such, I am giving myself another VA award. That's not to say that any of the other VAs did bad though, everyone was once again pretty good this time round. In conclusion, Mainspring is an episode I would call solid. Not amazing, but showed promise for the better shit later on. Number 10, Acceptance. Kicking off the top half of the list is a fairly fun and enjoyable episode, acting as the neat little bow of the package that is Thomas and Rosie's storyline throughout this season. What this one lacks in structure and is a bit flimsy editing wise is made up for by the clear passion, effort, direction and care put in by not just me but the wonderful VAs as well. Speaking of, this episode marks good old Little Owl's first VA role within the series, playing Terrence. And I think he quite rightly deserves the VA award this time round. He does a stellar job of capturing the charm of Terrence and he's just generally enjoyable to listen to. The obvious highlight of this one for me is the memorial scene, seeing the engine's memories of Rosie and her little cameo as a spirit in front of Thomas. It's quite sad because it's the last time Rosie's ever appeared on screen and Thomas has to let go, but it's ultimately a positive scene with all of the engine supporting Thomas as he puffs down the line at the end. This one's a good send-off and is quite a look at Thomas's character and how, just like the audience, he is finally able to move on with the rest of his life and gain some peace from it all. An episode I'm proud to say I produced. Number 9, Drought. This is one you might be surprised to see this high, but I genuinely have so much love for this episode, and whilst I don't think it's objectively the best, much like Tatma, as a fan of my work, this may just be the one I'm proudest of. What this episode was an attempt at as being close to the show as possible, while still retaining that more dramatised, realistic style the series has currently, and I think it worked. This one is just 2 straight adaptations of episodes from the show, with a few extra scenes sprinkled in for context. The adapted episodes are Doubleheader and my favourite episode from the show, Percy's Chocolate Crunch. That's it, there's no C-plot or anything, it's purely focused on that, with the underlying theme of a drought problem. It's never delved into as a concept, but it was done to tie up these two in a tight little bow and package them together. The droughts cause Percy to get angry because it means he can't have a washdown, and it means Toby doesn't get to take on water, so he gets stuck on Gordon's Hill. Drought is quite clearly an outlier in terms of plot and relevance to the overarching storylines, but I think that makes it stand out to me as an experimental sort of episode that paid off in the end. Whilst the next 8 on the list are objectively better, this episode is my favourite and will probably continue to be my favourite for a long time. If you want that classic Thomas feel with some of that locomotive spice added into the writing, Drought's your episode. Oh yeah, also the VA award goes to Juarez. Bye! Number 8, Wrath. This episode is probably not the most memorable of the series, but it is important for the build-up to the finale and for the character interaction. We have that Donald and James argument, of course, as well as Thomas's resurgence of sadness as it's been 6 months since Rosie's died, and Edward has to look out for him in a way. I like the way that these two plots end up coming together at the end via character and location. It's not like a Thomas episode that does this sort of thing at all. And so to see it being done in an enjoyable way, I think makes a nice change. I know some people have a problem with the fact that James destroys Donald in that argument, making him look superior only for him to almost cause a crash and not stop to help later, but that's kind of the point. James is complex, he's not entirely good or bad, he resides somewhere in the middle, and I think that creates some interesting dynamics, namely with Edward in this episode. So the way he acts here is down to his anger and his own selfishness. His own wrath, shall we say. I'll stop. Anyway, let's talk about VAs, and some of their best work was in this episode. Give yourselves a round of applause, guys. But who gets the award? None other than the Blue Isu with his beautiful portrayal of Edward in this one. The sadness, the worry, the frustration, all handled beautifully by him. Also, his Clarabelle voice is once again just the best. It's amusing and yet is still able to portray those emotions in a convincing way. What a lad. I'd say the only problem with this episode is the Thomas storyline is a bit overdone and it feels very same shit different day. Other than that, this is an important one for the series that you should be sure to check out if you haven't watched it yet. Number 7, Demons. The introduction of 2 of some of the most interesting characters of the show so far, and the voices both Rob and Juarez give to the twins are very enjoyable to listen to. I think Juarez is slightly better simply because the accent is more distinguishable and prominent, but they both really did well and they make Donald and Douglas great to see interacting with the other characters. I think Juarez gets the VA award this time around because of that. Anyway, on to the actual episode. I think the narrative is pretty decent with this one. I mean, it is just the Scottish twins introduction, but with other episodes mixed in, as well as Thomas's grief over Rosie, of course. Both of the crashes were also really fun to do, although Douglas's crash was a bit tricky. I think where Demons could use improvement is with the editing. It's very choppy, very quick, and it makes pacing a little too quick for my liking. Despite that though, there's quite a few little details from this one that I can appreciate, such as Donald and Douglas's treatment of Edward as if he's some sort of celebrity, or how we learn the signalman from Rosie's crash died. As a lot of people like to point out, the little things really boost this series and make it decent, and I'd have to agree. Demons is not the best episode on the list, but if you like Donald and Douglas and their introduction in the show, then you'll really enjoy this one. A bit choppy, but fun all the same. Number 6, Colliding Minds. Colliding Minds follows an inspection of Sodor after so many crashes and mishaps befalling the engines. However, the engines are surprised to find out that the inspector is an engine, Fergus, to be precise. Alfred and Sir Topham take him around Sodor, showing him the quarry and the harbour, before Alfred has to rescue Thomas from dangling off the edge of a viaduct. Nice bit of foreshadowing there. Everyone gives Alfred their utmost praise and respect, demonstrating that really, he's no villain like everyone thought. Even Gordon decides to bury the hatchet with him, which, as Thomas says, is high praise. I think you can see why this one got as high as it did, even just describing it to you. Every scene is either fun, interesting, or integral to the plot, and it really does bounds for the character of my personal favourite character, Alfred. I think the editing still needs a bit of improving, but it's so much better than the previous episode we just spoke about, and whilst the VA work isn't the best it's ever been, it's still decently good and is still a point of praise for the episode. The VA award for this episode is going to Little Al for his amazing portrayal of the professional and uptight Fergus and Thomas's driver. As always, it was a pleasure to have him involved and to listen to those lines upon editing. I think my favourite aspect of the episode though is the music. There's a lot of it and I think it's used quite well, but I don't think it overstays its welcome at all. From the themes of the show to the song at the end, it's all quite fitting and works well with the tone, I think. Colliding Minds is one that I think deserves a lot more praise than it gets, which is why it's up this high on the list, but it didn't quite get into the top 5. Let's take a peek at what episodes manage that now. Number 5, Parts. Parts is an episode I had a really good time making. It's a very triumphant one, and really the one big thing I don't like about this one is the fact I didn't name it Triumph or something. Parts is a weird name, I don't know why I called it that. The narrative is a bit messy for sure, but that doesn't infringe too badly on those moments, the happy ones, the sweet ones, the amusing ones, and the triumphant ones. I think this episode really gets you feeling those emotions, and is just a generally good Edward triumphing story. I also think this is an episode where I improved a lot as a VA, which I'm proud of, with Gordon and Sir Topham especially. The best VA though for me has to go to the Bluey 2 as Edward. He made those scenes including him so powerful, and it's just great to listen to him voice Edward in general. Of course, it wasn't just Edward that appeared in this episode though. Donald and Douglas got that deputation scene where they're told they can stay, which is really sweet. That scene has to be one of my favourites from series 1. It's just so powerful with the editing and the music really helping it to bring it alive. Parts is an episode about an underdog overcoming adversity, and I think it succeeds in portraying that message, which is why it got into the top 5. Number 4, Warning. Warning is an undeniably good episode. Whilst Henry does sort of lean into that more frightened personality seen all too often in the CGI era of the show, I think it's more acceptable here because it's a one-time thing, and for the rest of the series he's more akin to his classic personality. Anyway, in this episode Henry crashes whilst pulling the flying kipper, and when he returns from crew he's nervous to pull the train again. So Emily handles it, but in a weird twist of fate, because Emily took it and was unaware of the danger ahead at the harbour, she also crashes. This leads into Alfred revealing that an inspection is the next best course of action for Sodor, leading into the events of Colliding Minds. This episode does a lot for the relationship between Henry and Emily, which is never explicit, but that is their dynamic if you didn't clock it yet. This is especially apparent after Emily's crash at the harbour as they speak to one another. This narrative is really focused and organised too, with only little bits with Alfred sprinkled in for good measure, and even then the audience gets some little details about his backstory, so it's not totally pointless. Once again, the VA work is outstanding, and once again I'm going to have to give the award to the Bluey too, because he gives such a compelling performance as Alfred without even knowing the full backstory of the dude, so props to you Blue, you did good, chief. I also think the editing was great too. That montage of Henry puffing along the coastal tracks before he crashes is another moment that I believe to be another one of the best of the series. Apart from maybe the ending being not as heavy as it could be and the fast pacing, this episode is another one that I think a lot of you will enjoy. It's epic, it's got great characters, and it's a tale of romance. What more could you want? So now we're at the last 3, the upper echelons of the season. From here on out, all of these episodes I believe to be 10 out of 10s. But which one's gonna come in third? Let's find out, shall we? Number 3, Bittersweet. The finale to season 1, and what a way to end the series, eh? James dying and Douglas leaving, 2 mainstays, prominent characters throughout the actual show, gone just like that. I think everything about this was quite perfect and clean. The VAs, the editing, the narrative, all fairly solid for this grand finale to the first season. There's also quite a mixture of emotions to be had here. Happiness, sadness, worry, and many more. It really makes you feel that whole range, and that is what I love most about it. In fact, that's why the episode is called what it is. It's a nice nod to how bitter James's death leaves you feeling, but it is sweet seeing how Donald and Douglas make up before he goes. I know some people don't like that post-credit sequence, and it is a bit jarring to be fair, but honestly, that's kind of the point. This episode pulled no punches in terms of how sad and dark it got, so to go from Percy crying his eyes out to this, is because it contrasts so harshly. That morbid touch had to stay, and having really useful engine play over a screen, telling you that James died is quite dark in the most contrasting of ways. I think if there was one teensy-weensy nitpick I could give, it's probably the editing. It wasn't awful, and I thought I did a good job, but it's not like it was absolute perfection. So now for the VA award this episode, and I am of course going to be handing it to Juarez because his Percy scenes are some of his most powerful scenes I've ever had the pleasure of creating, and his brilliant work adds to the sheer sadness of it. Of course, all of the VAs did wonderfully, but this dude really stole the show. Be proud of yourself, man. Bittersweet is a great finale to the first season, and I think it's going to be difficult to top it for the next season. But you know me, I'm always up for a challenge. Number 2, Guilt. I know a lot of you were expecting this to be number 1, but nope. Guilt is what I would call season 1's swan song, in the sense that I think most people would objectively and critically call it the best one because of how beautifully it is done. It's all focused on one plot, or one situation, that being the aftermath of the Wellsworth explosion which Rosie was caught up in. Thomas faces the moral dilemma of having to say goodbye to Rosie or holding on to hope, and all of the repercussions that come with either choice. Meanwhile, we have Percy's guilt over Rosie being caught up in that whole debacle, knowing that he was meant to take the train that she was pulling when it happened. Survivor's guilt. Then, in the end, Rosie is taken away to be scrapped as Little Al dishes out his sweet, sweet vocals. It really is the magnum opus, and I think that's clear to anyone that watches. I wanted the first major death of Locomotives to be really sad because I wanted to see how much I could emotionally pull you lot, the audience. And it's safe to say that I found out I can. That does not sound evil at all. Once again, the VA award is going to Juarez because of the Percy survivor guilt thing. It's quite a moving scene. However, I think a scene that is better than that one is the one between Thomas and Rosie's ghost just before she's taken away. They're just having this little chat, and it's so real, and yet she's not really there. And it is one of my favourite scenes to this day, and it will probably carry on being so for years to come. Guilt is emotional, sweet, and it's the true swan song of Locomotive Season 1, and long shall it reign as such. Despite that though, there is one episode that I believe is better. The best episode of Locomotive Season 1, in my opinion, is number 1, Thunderstorm. Now that's probably not the one you were expecting, right? But for me, Thunderstorm encapsulates this season and the whole show in the best way. The engines, despite their differences, all come together to battle the raging storm. We have the Toby and Gordon dynamic on full display, as well as Gordon's and Thomas's relationships with Edward. Even James and Henry get their bit on the side, and I think that was all done to the best standard. I think you can really get a lot out of the characters and their personalities and how their dynamics work when they're pushed into that dangerous situation. This one was all focused narrative-wise. Editing-wise, it held strong too, and the VAs did really well as per usual, but the VA award can only go to one person, and that for me shall be Rob the Green Engine, because his Henry lines were amazingly comical and done the exact precise way I wanted them said. Rob is a comical genius when it comes to this stuff and delivers it in such a natural yet amusing way and makes Thunderstorm all the more of a delight to watch. I know this is not what most of you were expecting to be at number 1, but I genuinely think that this is probably the best episode of Locomotives I've made from Season 1's bunch, and possibly out of Season 2's, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So we've reached the end of this more all over the place type of video. I hope you've enjoyed looking at what you all think, the viewers at home. I hope you've enjoyed the cast talking about their times with the series, their favourite bits and their not so favourite bits, and I hope you've enjoyed me placing all of the episodes in a ranking style format, as well as talking about how this series came to be what it is today. I'm going to go now and leave you all with a special surprise, the Season 2 intro of Locomotives. So I've been Peter Sam, you've been you, and I'll see you all in the second season. Bye bye.